Marcus Thompson stood frozen outside the principal's office, his work uniform still damp with sweat from his morning shift at the construction site. Through the frosted glass door, he could hear his 8-year-old twin daughters, Lily and Rose, sniffling quietly while Principal Martinez's stern voice carried through the hallway. This was the third time this month he'd been called away from work, and his supervisor's patience was wearing thin. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What Marcus didn't know was that his daughters possessed a secret talent that would soon turn their small town upside down, exposing a web of corruption that reached far deeper than simple schoolyard bullying. The morning had started like any other in the Thompson household. Marcus had been up since 4:30, preparing lunch boxes in their cramped kitchen while trying to keep the noise down so he wouldn't wake Mrs. Chen, their elderly neighbor who helped watch the girls before school. The small 2-bedroom apartment they rented on Maple Street wasn't much, but it was home. Pictures of his late wife Sarah covered the refrigerator, her bright smile watching over their daily routines even 3 years after the car accident that had left Marcus to raise the twins alone. Lily and Rose had been unusually quiet during breakfast, picking at their cereal while stealing glances at each other. Marcus had attributed it to typical Monday morning blues, not realizing that his daughters were harboring a growing fear of what awaited them at Jefferson Elementary. The twins had always been close, but lately they seemed to communicate in whispers and worried looks that made Marcus's chest tighten with concern. "Dad, do we have to go to school today?" Rose had asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She was the more outspoken of the twins, usually bursting with energy and questions. Seeing her so subdued sent alarm bells ringing in Marcus's mind. "Of course, sweetheart. Education is important, remember? Your mom always said learning was the greatest adventure." Marcus had knelt down to tie Lily's shoelaces, noticing how she flinched slightly when he moved too quickly. "Is everything okay at school? You girls have been awfully quiet lately." Lily, the quieter twin, had simply shaken her head and forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Everything's fine, Daddy. We're just tired." Marcus had wanted to press further, but the clock on the microwave reminded him that he needed to drop them off and get to the construction site by 7. The Morrison Plaza project was behind schedule, and as the site foreman, Marcus couldn't afford any more absences. The pay was decent enough to keep them afloat, but barely, and losing this job would mean losing their apartment. The drive to Jefferson Elementary had been filled with an uncomfortable silence. Usually the twins would chatter about their upcoming day, sharing excitement about art class or complaining about math homework. Today, they sat in the back seat like two small prisoners being transported to their doom. Marcus watched them through the rearview mirror, noting how they held hands tightly as if drawing strength from each other. "Remember, if you need anything at all, you call Mrs. Peterson in the office and she'll contact me immediately," Marcus had said as he pulled up to the school's circular driveway. Jefferson Elementary was a modest brick building that had served the community for over 40 years. The morning drop-off was always chaotic, with parents hurrying to deliver their children before rushing off to work. "We know, Dad," Rose had replied, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. Both girls had hugged him extra tight before climbing out of his beat-up Honda Civic, their small backpacks looking enormous on their thin frames. Marcus had watched them walk toward the entrance, noting how they stayed close together, scanning the playground nervously. Other children ran past them, laughing and playing, but Lily and Rose moved like they were navigating a minefield. Something was definitely wrong, but Marcus had to trust that the school would keep them safe while he worked to provide for their future. The construction site had been particularly demanding that morning. They were pouring concrete for the plaza's foundation, a process that required constant attention and couldn't be interrupted. Marcus had thrown himself into the work, directing his crew with the efficiency that had earned him his promotion 6 months earlier. The physical labor helped quiet his worried thoughts about the twins, but every time his phone buzzed with a text message, his heart would skip a beat. Around 10:30, Marcus had been calibrating the concrete mixer when his phone rang. The caller ID showed Jefferson Elementary, and his stomach immediately dropped. He'd signaled to his assistant foreman to take over while he answered the call. "Mr. Thompson, this is Mrs. Peterson from Jefferson Elementary. I'm calling because there's been an incident involving Lily and Rose. Principal Martinez needs to meet with you as soon as possible." The words had hit Marcus like a physical blow. "What kind of incident? Are they hurt?" "They're physically unharmed, but there was an altercation during morning recess. I really think it's best if Principal Martinez explains the situation in person. How soon can you be here?" Marcus had looked around the construction site, calculating the disruption his absence would cause. The concrete pour was at a critical stage, and leaving now would put the entire day's work at risk. But his daughters needed him, and that was all that mattered. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he'd said, already removing his hard hat and safety vest. The drive to the school had felt endless, traffic moving at a crawl, while Marcus's imagination conjured increasingly dire scenarios. Had the twins been in a fight? Were they being suspended? His daughters were gentle souls who wouldn't hurt a fly, so whatever had happened must have been serious for the principal to demand an immediate meeting. Now, standing outside Principal Martinez's office, Marcus could hear his daughters' quiet voices through the door. They were explaining something to the principal, their words tumbling over each other in the way they did when they were nervous or excited. He knocked gently before entering, and the conversation stopped abruptly. Principal Martinez was a stern woman in her 50s who had been running Jefferson Elementary with an iron fist for over a decade. She sat behind her large oak desk, her expression unreadable as she gestured for Marcus to take a seat across from her. Lily and Rose sat in smaller chairs beside him, their faces streaked with tears, but their postures defiant in a way that reminded Marcus painfully of their mother. "Mr. Thompson, thank you for coming so quickly," Principal Martinez began, her tone formal and cold. "I'm afraid we have a serious situation that requires immediate attention." Marcus reached over to squeeze each twin's hand, drawing strength from their presence. "What happened? Mrs. Peterson said there was an altercation." "Your daughters were involved in a physical confrontation with several other students during morning recess," the principal continued, consulting a file on her desk. "According to witnesses, Lily and Rose initiated the violence by pushing and hitting 3 fifth-grade students who were simply trying to include them in their game." Marcus felt his eyebrows furrow in confusion. This didn't sound like his daughters at all. "I'm sorry, but that doesn't make sense. Lily and Rose aren't violent children. They've never been in trouble for fighting before." "Nevertheless, Mr. Thompson, multiple students and 1 teacher witnessed the incident. Your daughters attacked Madison Hayes, Brooklyn Stevens, and Chloe Park without provocation. This kind of behavior is absolutely unacceptable at Jefferson Elementary." Rose suddenly spoke up, her voice stronger than it had been all morning. "That's not what happened. They were being mean to us again, and we just tried to get away." "Rose, we've already discussed this," Principal Martinez said sharply. "The witness accounts are very clear about what transpired." Marcus looked down at his daughters, seeing something in their eyes that made his protective instincts flare. These weren't the faces of children who had started a fight for no reason. These were the faces of children who had been pushed to their breaking point. "Girls, can you tell me what really happened?" Marcus asked gently, ignoring the principal's disapproving look. Lily, who rarely spoke up in front of adults, took a shaky breath. "Daddy, Madison and her friends have been picking on us for weeks. They call us names and say mean things about Mommy. Today, they cornered us by the monkey bars and wouldn't let us leave. They said we're poor and dirty because you work construction, Rose added, her voice growing stronger with indignation. And they said Mommy died because she didn't want to be around us anymore. Marcus felt his blood pressure spike at his daughter's words. He looked at Principal Martinez, expecting to see some recognition that his children had been defending themselves against bullying. Instead, her expression remained skeptical and cold. Mr. Thompson, children often exaggerate situations to avoid taking responsibility for their actions, the principal said dismissively. Madison Hayes is one of our top students and comes from a very respected family in the community. Her father is Dr. Hayes, who serves on our school board. I find it highly unlikely that she would engage in the behavior your daughters are describing. The mention of Dr. Hayes sent a chill down Marcus's spine. He knew the name well. Dr. Richard Hayes was not only on the school board, but also one of the wealthiest men in their small town of Millbrook. His daughter Madison was known throughout the community as a model student, often featured in the local newspaper for her academic achievements and community service projects. With all due respect, Principal Martinez, I know my daughters. They're not liars, Marcus said firmly. If they say they were being bullied, then that's what happened. Mr. Thompson, I understand your desire to defend your children, but we must deal with facts, not emotions, the principal replied curtly. The fact is that your daughters physically assaulted 3 other students. This is Lily and Rose's first serious disciplinary issue, so I'm prepared to be lenient with a 3-day suspension. However, any future incidents will result in more severe consequences. Marcus felt the world tilt slightly. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. A 3-day suspension would mean finding childcare he couldn't afford and possibly missing more work that could cost him his job. But more importantly, it meant his daughters were being punished for defending themselves against bullies. There has to be some kind of investigation, Marcus insisted. Surely you have security cameras on the playground. Principal Martinez's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Unfortunately, the camera system in that area of the playground has been malfunctioning for several weeks. We're waiting on repairs. Something about her answer felt too convenient, too rehearsed. Marcus had spent enough years in construction to recognize when someone was trying to cover something up. The timing of the camera malfunction, the immediate dismissal of his daughter's account, the emphasis on the other students' family connections, it all felt orchestrated. I want to speak with the teacher who witnessed this incident, Marcus said, his voice taking on the firm tone he used with difficult subcontractors. That won't be necessary, Principal Martinez replied quickly. Mrs. Harrison has already provided her statement, and it corroborates what the other students reported. Then I want to see that statement. The principal's jaw tightened. Mr. Thompson, I don't appreciate having my professional judgment questioned. I've been running this school for 12 years, and I know how to handle disciplinary matters. Marcus looked down at his daughters again, seeing how they shrank back in their chairs every time Principal Martinez raised her voice. These weren't children who had caused trouble. These were children who had been systematically intimidated into silence. What about the other times? Marcus asked suddenly. You said this was their first serious disciplinary issue, but my daughters just told me this has been going on for weeks. What was done about the previous incidents? Principal Martinez shuffled papers on her desk, avoiding eye contact. There's no record of any previous incidents involving your daughters. If they had reported bullying, we would have addressed it immediately. But we did report it, Rose burst out, tears streaming down her face. We told Mrs. Harrison 3 times, and she said Madison and her friends were just trying to be our friends. Rose, that's enough, Principal Martinez snapped. I won't have you making accusations against my staff." Marcus felt his protective instincts surge as he watched his daughter cower at the principal's harsh tone. Something was very wrong here, and it went beyond simple playground politics. The way Principal Martinez defended certain students while dismissing his daughter's claims, the convenient camera malfunction, the refusal to provide witness statements, it all pointed to a cover-up. "I'm not accepting this suspension," Marcus said firmly, standing up and placing protective hands on his daughter's shoulders. "Not until there's been a proper investigation that includes interviewing all the witnesses and reviewing any available evidence." Principal Martinez's face flushed with anger. "Mr. Thompson, you don't have a choice in this matter. The suspension is effective immediately. If you continue to be disruptive, I'll have no choice but to involve the district superintendent." "Good," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the anger boiling inside him. "I think the superintendent should know that Jefferson Elementary is allowing certain students to bully others without consequences while punishing the victims when they try to defend themselves." The principal's expression shifted to something that looked almost like panic before she quickly composed herself. "Mr. Thompson, I strongly advise you to reconsider your position. Making unfounded accusations against the school could have serious consequences for your daughter's future here." The threat was thinly veiled but unmistakable. Marcus felt his hands clench into fists, but he forced himself to remain calm for his daughter's sake. This woman was clearly protecting someone, and that someone had enough influence to make her willing to sacrifice 2 innocent children. "Come on, girls," Marcus said gently, helping Lily and Rose gather their backpacks. "We're going home." As they walked toward the office door, Principal Martinez called out behind them, "Mr. Thompson, this suspension will be on their permanent record. I hope you understand what that means for their academic future." Marcus paused at the door, looking back at the woman who was supposed to protect all children equally. "What I understand is that my daughters deserve better than this, and I'm going to make sure they get it." The walk through the school hallways felt like a march through enemy territory. Students and teachers stopped to stare as Marcus led his daughters toward the exit, whispers following in their wake. By tomorrow, the entire school would know that the Thompson twins had been suspended for fighting, but no one would know the truth about why it had happened. In the parking lot, Marcus knelt down to his daughter's eye level, wrapping them both in a fierce hug. They clung to him like lifelines, their small bodies shaking with residual fear and relief at being removed from the hostile environment inside the school. "Daddy, are we in trouble?" Lily whispered against his shoulder. "No, sweetheart. You're not in trouble. You did nothing wrong," Marcus assured her, his voice thick with emotion. "But I need you both to tell me everything that's been happening at school, every detail, no matter how small." As they drove home, the twins began to open up about weeks of systematic bullying that had escalated from name-calling to physical intimidation. Madison Hayes and her friends had targeted them specifically because of their family's financial situation and their mother's death, using both as weapons to inflict maximum emotional damage. "They said poor kids don't belong at Jefferson," Rose explained, her voice gaining strength as she realized her father believed her. "And when we told Mrs. Harrison, she said we were being too sensitive and that we should try harder to fit in." "Madison's mum comes to school all the time for volunteer activities," Lily added quietly. "She brings expensive treats for Madison's class and gives presents to the teachers. Mrs. Harrison always acts really nice when she's around." Marcus felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. The Hayes family's wealth and influence had created a protective bubble around their daughter, allowing her to bully other children with impunity. When his daughters had finally reached their breaking point and fought back, the school's response had been swift and decisive, but only against the victims. "Girls, I want you to know that what happened to you isn't fair, and it's not going to continue," Marcus said as he pulled into their apartment complex. "But I need to ask you something. Important. Have you ever told anyone else about your dancing?" The twins exchanged one of their meaningful glances. Over the past year, they had been teaching themselves dance routines from videos they watched on Marcus's old laptop. What had started as a way to cope with missing their mother had evolved into something extraordinary. Both girls possessed a natural grace and rhythm that seemed to transcend their young age, creating performances that were both technically impressive and deeply moving. "Only Mrs. Chen," Rose admitted. "She saw us practicing in the courtyard and said we were like little angels." Marcus smiled for the first time that day. Mrs. Chen was their neighbor, a former professional dancer who had fled China in the 1960s. If she had praised the twins' abilities, then they truly had something special. "Would you be willing to show your dancing to other people?" Marcus asked carefully. "I'm thinking it might be time for the whole town to see what the Thompson family is really made of." The twins' faces lit up with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. They had been hiding their talent, just like they had been hiding the extent of their bullying, afraid that drawing attention to themselves would only make things worse. "Do you really think people would want to watch us dance?" Lily asked shyly. "Sweetheart, I think people need to see you dance," Marcus replied, his mind already forming the beginnings of a plan. "And I think it's time this town learned that families like ours have just as much value as anyone else." That afternoon, while the twins napped off the emotional exhaustion of their morning ordeal, Marcus made a series of phone calls. First, he contacted his supervisor to explain the situation and arrange for family leave time. Then he called his brother Jake, who worked as a freelance videographer in the next town over. Finally, he reached out to several parents he knew whose children also attended Jefferson Elementary. Parents who had mentioned their own concerns about the school's handling of bullying incidents. As evening approached, Marcus sat down with Lily and Rose to discuss their options. The suspension meant they couldn't return to school for 3 days, but those 3 days might be exactly what they needed to change the trajectory of their lives. "I've been thinking about what happened today," Marcus began, settling into the worn couch between his daughters. "And I've realized that sometimes when people try to make you feel small, the best response is to show them just how big you really are." "What do you mean, Daddy?" Rose asked, curling up against his side. "I mean that maybe it's time to stop hiding your light under a bushel," Marcus replied, using one of Sarah's favorite expressions. "You girls have a gift, and gifts are meant to be shared. What if we could find a way to show everyone in Millbrook just how special you are?" Lily sat up straighter, her eyes beginning to sparkle with possibility. Like a real performance, Marcus confirmed. "But only if you want to. This would be a big step, and once we do this, there's no going back to hiding." The twins looked at each other, having one of their silent conversations that never failed, to amaze Marcus. Finally, Rose turned back to him with a determined expression that reminded him so much of Sarah, it took his breath away. "We want to do it, Daddy. We want to show everyone that we're not just poor kids who don't belong. We want to show them who we really are." Marcus pulled both girls into another hug, feeling a surge of pride and determination that he hadn't experienced since Sarah's death. His daughters had been pushed to their breaking point by a system that valued wealth and connections over character and talent. But they were about to discover that the Thompson family had their own kind of power, one that couldn't be bought or sold. "Then that's what we'll do," Marcus said firmly. "We're going to show this town something they'll never forget." As the twins drifted off to sleep that night, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with his laptop, researching everything he could find about the Hayes family and their connections to Jefferson Elementary. What he discovered was a web of influence that extended far beyond the school board, reaching into local government, business partnerships, and community organizations. Dr. Richard Hayes wasn't just wealthy, he was the unofficial kingmaker of Millbrook, the man whose approval could make or break careers, businesses, and reputations. His wife, Victoria Hayes, served on the boards of multiple charitable organizations and was known for her carefully curated social media presence that showcased their family's philanthropic activities. But Marcus also found something else in his research. Several articles about other families who had left Millbrook suddenly, citing better opportunities elsewhere. When he dug deeper, he found a pattern of families with children who had supposedly caused problems at Jefferson Elementary. Problems that resulted in quick resolutions that always seemed to favor the same small group of influential families. The Thompson twins weren't the first children to be targeted by this system, and they wouldn't be the last unless someone stood up to challenge it. Marcus realized that his daughter's suspension wasn't just about playground bullying. It was about maintaining a social order that kept certain families in power while silencing anyone who threatened their dominance. As he closed the laptop and prepared for bed, Marcus made a silent promise to Sarah's memory and to his daughter's future. The next 3 days would be about more than just clearing their names or fighting an unjust suspension. They would be about exposing a system of corruption that had been hiding in plain sight, protected by wealth and influence, and sustained by the silence of those too afraid to speak up. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Marcus would start by documenting everything his daughters had told him about the bullying, creating a timeline of incidents that the school had ignored or covered up. Then, he would reach out to other parents who might have similar stories, building a coalition of voices that couldn't be dismissed or silenced. But most importantly, he would help Lily and Rose prepare for a performance that would showcase not just their incredible talent, but their resilience, their strength, and their refusal to be diminished by those who sought to tear them down. The Thompson family was about to make their stand, and Millbrook would never be the same. The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that usually filled Marcus with optimism. But today, it carried an undercurrent of determination mixed with apprehension. He had spent most of the night awake, scrolling through social media pages and local news articles, mapping out the intricate web of connections that seemed to protect certain families in Millbrook while leaving others vulnerable to systematic persecution. Lily and Rose were already awake when he checked on them at 6:30, sitting cross-legged on Rose's bed and whispering quietly to each other. They had developed this habit of early morning conferences ever since Sarah's death, as if they needed to prepare themselves mentally for whatever challenges the day might bring. Today, however, their whispered conversation had a different quality entirely, one that spoke of shared excitement rather than shared anxiety. "Good morning, my beautiful girls," Marcus said softly, settling on the edge of the bed between them. "How are we feeling about today?" "Nervous, but excited," Rose replied honestly, her characteristic directness shining through despite everything they had endured yesterday. "We practiced some of our routines last night after you went to sleep. We want to make sure everything is perfect." Marcus felt a surge of pride at his daughter's resilience. Less than 24 hours after being unjustly suspended from school, they were already channeling their energy into something positive and productive. It reminded him of Sarah's unwavering ability to find hope in the darkest circumstances, a trait that had helped her battle through her final months with grace and determination. "We don't need perfect," Marcus assured them, smoothing down Lily's sleep-tousled hair. "We just need authentic. When people see who you really are, when they witness the beauty and strength you carry inside, that will be more powerful than any performance that's been rehearsed to mechanical precision." Lily nodded thoughtfully, her quiet nature making her observations all the more profound when she chose to share them. "Daddy, yesterday when Principal Martinez was being mean to us, I kept thinking about what Mommy used to say about diamonds, how they only shine bright because they've been under so much pressure." The wisdom in his 8-year-old daughter's words nearly took Marcus's breath away. Sarah had indeed used that metaphor during her illness, explaining to the twins that difficult times weren't meant to break them, but to reveal the strength that had been inside them all along. Hearing Lily apply that lesson to their current situation filled Marcus with a mixture of pride and heartbreak that threatened to overwhelm him. "Your mother would be so proud of how you're handling this," he managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. "And she would absolutely love seeing you dance again. Remember how she used to say that dancing was like prayers made visible?" Both girls smiled at the memory, their faces lighting up in a way that transformed them from victims of bullying into confident young performers preparing for their moment to shine. Marcus made a mental note to include some of Sarah's favorite songs in whatever performance they planned, knowing that her presence would be felt even in her physical absence. The morning routine proceeded with an energy that felt almost electric. While the twins took turns in the shower and selected their most comfortable clothes for what promised to be a long day of preparation, Marcus prepared a breakfast that felt more like a celebration than a simple meal. Pancakes with fresh berries, turkey bacon, and orange juice filled their small kitchen with aromas that spoke of special occasions and family traditions. "Uncle Jake is coming over at 9, Marcus announced as they settled around their tiny dining table. "He's bringing his professional camera equipment, and he wants to film some practice sessions so we can see how everything looks on video." Jake Thompson was Marcus's younger brother by 3 years, but their life paths had diverged dramatically after high school. While Marcus had chosen the stability of construction work and early marriage, Jake had pursued his passion for videography and digital media, building a successful freelance business that allowed him to travel throughout the region, documenting everything from weddings to corporate events. The brothers had maintained a close relationship despite their different lifestyles, and Jake had been instrumental in helping Marcus navigate the practical aspects of single parenthood after Sarah's death. More importantly, Jake possessed the technical skills and creative vision that would be essential for showcasing the twins' talents to the widest possible audience. "Is Uncle Jake going to put our dancing on the internet?" Rose asked, her eyes widening with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Only if you want him to," Marcus replied carefully. "But Rose, if we're going to do this, if we're going to show people who you really are, we need to think big. The people at Jefferson Elementary, the families who think they can treat others badly because of money or social status, they need to see that talent and character matter more than bank accounts or family connections." Lily set down her fork and looked directly at her father with an intensity that reminded him of Sarah's most serious moments. "Daddy, are we doing this to get back at Madison and her friends?" The question caught Marcus off guard with its perceptiveness. His daughters were forcing him to examine his own motivations, to distinguish between seeking justice and seeking revenge. It was a distinction that would define not only their approach to the current situation, but also the kind of people they would become as they grew up. "That's a very important question, sweetheart," Marcus said thoughtfully. "I think we're doing this to show everyone, including Madison and her friends, that every person has value and deserves to be treated with respect. Sometimes people act badly because they've never learned that lesson properly. Maybe seeing you too shine will help them understand it better. And maybe it will help other kids who are getting picked on too," Rose added, her natural empathy extending beyond their own situation. "If they see that we didn't let the mean kids win, maybe they'll feel braver too." Marcus felt his heart swell with pride at his daughter's emotional maturity. They were approaching this challenge not with bitterness or a desire for retaliation, but with a genuine hope that their experience might help others in similar situations. It was exactly the kind of response Sarah would have encouraged, turning personal pain into a force for positive change. Jake arrived precisely at 9 o'clock, his SUV loaded with camera equipment, lighting rigs, and sound recording devices that looked professional enough for a major film production. Marcus helped him carry everything into their small living room, which they quickly transformed into an impromptu studio space by moving furniture and hanging sheets to create better lighting conditions. "All right, my favorite nieces," Jake announced with his characteristic enthusiasm. "I've been looking forward to this ever since your dad called yesterday. I want you to know that I've filmed professional dancers, Broadway performers, even some folks who ended up on national television talent shows. But I have a feeling that what you two are going to show me today is going to be something really special." The twins exchanged one of their meaningful glances before Rose stepped forward to serve as their unofficial spokesperson. "Uncle Jake, we've been working on 3 different routines. One is to a song that Mommy really loved, one is more modern and energetic, and one is slow and emotional. Which one should we start with?" Jake considered the question seriously, understanding that the order of their performances would significantly impact the emotional journey they were creating for their audience. "Let's start with the modern, energetic piece to warm up and get comfortable with the camera. Then we'll do the emotional piece while you're feeling confident and relaxed. We'll save your mom's song for last, when everything is feeling natural and authentic." Marcus settled into a corner chair to observe, but found himself becoming emotional almost immediately as his daughters began their first routine. The music was contemporary pop with a driving beat that seemed to energize every cell in their bodies. Their choreography was intricate without being overly complex, showcasing their natural rhythm and their incredible ability to move as one unit while still maintaining their individual personalities. What struck Marcus most powerfully was the transformation that occurred the moment the music began. Lily, usually so quiet and reserved, became a dynamic presence who commanded attention with every gesture. Rose, typically the more outgoing twin, found a grace and elegance that balanced her natural energy perfectly. Together, they created something that transcended their young age and limited training, delivering a performance that spoke to something universal about resilience, joy, and the power of artistic expression. Jake moved around them with professional efficiency, capturing multiple angles and close-ups that would allow him to edit together a comprehensive video that showcased both their technical skills and their emotional connection to the music. Marcus could see his brother's excitement growing with each passing minute, recognizing that he was documenting something truly extraordinary. "Girls, that was incredible," Jake announced when the first routine ended. "I mean, seriously incredible. You move like you've been training professionally for years. Where did you learn to do that?" "We taught ourselves," Lily said simply. "We watch videos on Daddy's computer and practice in the courtyard behind our building. Mrs. Chen sometimes gives us suggestions, but mostly we just figure it out together." Jake looked at Marcus with an expression of amazement. "They're completely self-taught. Marcus, do you understand how rare this is? Most kids their age who dance this well have been taking lessons since they were toddlers and have parents spending thousands of dollars on training and costumes." "I'm beginning to understand a lot of things," Marcus replied quietly, watching his daughters stretch and prepare for their second routine, including why certain people might feel threatened by children who can achieve this much through hard work and natural talent alone. The second routine was indeed more emotional, set to a haunting melody that seemed to draw out every ounce of feeling the twins carried in their young hearts. Their movements were slower, more deliberate, telling a story of loss and recovery that paralleled their own journey through grief and toward healing. Marcus found himself thinking of Sarah throughout the performance, imagining how proud she would be to see their daughters channeling their pain into something so beautiful and moving. Jake's camera work became more intimate during this piece, focusing on facial expressions and the small details that conveyed the depth of emotion behind each movement. Marcus realized that his brother wasn't just documenting a dance performance. He was creating a work of art that would serve as both entertainment and advocacy, showing the world that these two little girls possessed depths of feeling and expression that deserved respect and protection. "That was absolutely breathtaking," Jake whispered when the music ended, his own eyes moist with tears. "Girls, you made me feel things through your dancing that I can't even put into words. That's the mark of true artists." "Really?" Rose asked, her cheeks flushed with exertion and excitement. "You're not just saying that because you're our uncle." "Honey, I'm a professional," Jake replied seriously. "If this wasn't good, I would find a nice way to tell you so, because that would be better for everyone in the long run. But this isn't just good. This is exceptional. This is the kind of thing that changes people's minds and opens their hearts." Marcus felt a surge of gratitude toward his brother, not just for his technical expertise, but for his honesty and encouragement. The twins needed to hear from someone outside their immediate family that their talents were real and significant, that they weren't just the products of a loving father's biased perspective. As they prepared for the final routine, the one set to Sarah's favorite song, Marcus found himself becoming more emotional than he had anticipated. The twins had chosen "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" for this piece, the same song Sarah had hummed while doing household chores, the same melody she had sung as a lullaby during their infancy and as a comfort during her final illness. "Daddy, are you okay?" Lily asked, noticing his emotional state. "I'm perfect, sweetheart," Marcus assured her, though his voice betrayed the depth of his feelings. "I'm just thinking about how much your mom would love seeing you dance to her favorite song." The twins positioned themselves in the center of their makeshift stage, holding hands as the opening notes filled their small living room. What followed was a performance that seemed to transcend the physical limitations of their space, creating a sense of openness and possibility that transformed their cramped apartment into something magical and infinite. Their choreography for this piece was the most sophisticated yet, incorporating lifts and synchronized movements that required perfect timing and absolute trust in each other. But more than the technical aspects, it was the emotional honesty of their performance that took Marcus's breath away. They danced not just with their bodies, but with their entire beings, channeling their love for their mother, their grief at her loss, and their hope for the future into movements that seemed to make the very air around them shimmer with meaning. Jake worked quietly around them, his camera capturing every nuance of their performance while remaining unobtrusive enough to preserve the intimacy of the moment. Marcus could see his brother wiping away tears even as he continued filming, moved by the same profound beauty that was affecting everyone in the room. When the song ended, a profound silence filled the apartment, broken only by the soft sounds of the twins catching their breath. Marcus rose from his chair and gathered both girls into a fierce hug, overwhelmed by pride and love and a sense of Sarah's presence that felt almost tangible. "That was perfect," he whispered against their hair. "That was absolutely perfect." Jake lowered his camera and approached the family group, his professional composure finally cracking completely. "Girls, I've been doing this for 15 years, and I have never, ever seen anything more beautiful than what you just shared with us. That wasn't just dancing. That was pure art, pure emotion, pure truth. Do you really think other people will like it?" Rose asked, her voice small despite the confidence she had displayed during the performance. "Honey, I think other people are going to be absolutely amazed," Jake replied. "But more importantly, I think they're going to understand something about who you are and what you're capable of. And I think that understanding is going to change a lot of minds about what really matters in this world." Marcus looked around their small living room, taking in the professional equipment, the transformed space, and his daughters still glowing with the aftermath of their performances. This was just the beginning. The footage Jake had captured would need to be edited, uploaded, and shared strategically to maximum impact. But more immediately, Marcus had other plans for showcasing his daughter's talents. Plans that would bring their message directly to the people who needed to hear it most. "Jake, how quickly can you put together a short video that showcases all three routines?" Marcus asked. "Give me tonight and tomorrow morning," Jake replied. "I'll create something that tells their story while highlighting their incredible abilities." "Are you thinking of entering them in a competition or submitting to talent scouts?" "I'm thinking of something more immediate and more local," Marcus said, his expression growing determined. "There's a school board meeting tomorrow night, and according to the district website, they have a public comment period at the beginning of each meeting. I think it's time the school board saw exactly what kind of students they're allowing to be bullied and silenced." Jake's eyes widened with understanding and approval. "Marcus, that's brilliant. Instead of just complaining about the injustice, you're going to show them what they're losing when they allow talented kids to be pushed aside." "More than that," Marcus continued, his plan crystallizing as he spoke, "I'm going to show them that excellence comes in many forms, and that some of the most extraordinary people in our community might not be the ones with the biggest houses or the most expensive cars." Lily and Rose listened to this conversation with growing excitement, beginning to understand that their dancing could serve a purpose beyond simple artistic expression. They were going to use their talents as a form of advocacy, demonstrating their worth and dignity in a way that couldn't be dismissed or ignored. "But Daddy," Lily said thoughtfully, "what if people at the meeting don't like our dancing? What if they think we're just showing off?" Marcus knelt down to meet her eyes, directly. "Sweetheart, there will always be people who don't appreciate art or who can't recognize talent when they see it. But that says more about them than it does about you. You're not dancing to impress anyone or to prove anything. You're dancing because it's who you are, and the world deserves to see who you are." "And," Rose added with growing confidence, "if other kids see us being brave and standing up for ourselves, maybe they'll feel brave enough to stand up for themselves too." The rest of the day was spent in detailed planning and preparation. Jake remained for several hours, helping to coordinate the technical aspects of their school board presentation, while also beginning the editing process for the longer video that would eventually be shared online. Marcus made phone calls to confirm the timing and procedures for public comments at school board meetings, while also reaching out to several other parents who had expressed concerns about bullying and favoritism at Jefferson Elementary. By evening, their plan had taken on a life of its own. Word had somehow spread through the parent network about the Thompson family's intention to address the school board, and Marcus's phone was buzzing with messages of support and offers of assistance. Parents who had previously felt isolated and powerless were beginning to realize that they weren't alone in their concerns about the school's handling of disciplinary issues. "Daddy," Mrs. Rodriguez called and said that her son Carlos got in trouble for defending himself against the same kids who pick on us, Rose reported, having answered the phone while Marcus was reviewing his notes for the school board presentation. And Mrs. Park said her daughter Jessica has been having nightmares about going to school because some girls keep calling her names about being Asian, Lily added quietly. Marcus felt his resolve strengthen as he realized that his daughter's situation was part of a much larger pattern of discrimination and intimidation. The school board meeting wouldn't just be about clearing the twins' names, it would be about exposing a systematic problem that was affecting multiple families and creating a toxic environment for any child who didn't fit the approved social mold. "Girls, are you sure you're ready for this?" Marcus asked one final time. "Once we do this, there's no going back. People will know your names. They'll have opinions about you and about our family. Some of those opinions might not be very nice." Lily and Rose exchanged one of their meaningful looks before Rose answered, for both of them. "Daddy, people already have opinions about us. Mean opinions. At least this way, they'll have to have those opinions while watching us do something amazing. And maybe," Lily added with quiet wisdom, "some people will change their minds about what makes somebody special." Marcus gathered his daughters into another family hug, marveling at their courage and maturity. Tomorrow night, they would walk into a room full of school officials, board members, and community leaders, most of whom already had preconceived notions about single-parent families and children from lower-income backgrounds. But they would walk in with their heads held high, prepared to demonstrate that true worth couldn't be measured by bank accounts or family connections. As he tucked the twins into bed that night, Marcus reflected on how dramatically their lives had changed in just 48 hours. What had started as a routine suspension had evolved into something much larger, a chance to advocate not just for themselves, but for every child who had ever been marginalized or dismissed because they didn't fit someone else's narrow definition of value. "Sweet dreams, my beautiful dancers," Marcus whispered as he turned off their bedroom light. "Tomorrow night, you're going to help change the world." The next day dawned with an energy that felt almost electric. Marcus had taken another day off work, using the last of his personal time to ensure that everything would be perfect for their school board presentation. He spent the morning calling local media contacts, explaining that concerned parents would be addressing issues of bullying and discrimination at that evening's meeting. Jake arrived early with a laptop and portable projection equipment, planning to ensure that the video footage would display properly in the school board meeting room. The twins spent the day practicing their routines one final time, not because they needed the rehearsal, but because the physical movement helped calm their nerves and focus their energy. "Remember," Marcus told them as they prepared to leave for the meeting, "you're not performing for their approval. You're sharing your gifts because the world needs to see them. Whether they appreciate what you're offering is up to them, but that doesn't change the value of what you're bringing." The school district administration building was busier than Marcus had expected when they arrived an hour before the meeting. Cars filled the parking lot, and he could see clusters of people gathering near the entrance, many of whom he recognized as parents from Jefferson Elementary. Word had clearly spread beyond his initial phone calls, and the community was showing up to witness whatever was about to unfold. Inside the meeting room, Marcus was surprised to see several familiar faces among the school board members. Dr. Richard Hayes sat at one end of the board table, his expression carefully neutral, but his posture tense in a way that suggested he knew this meeting might not proceed according to his usual script. "Daddy, there are a lot of people here," Lily whispered as they found seats in the front row. "That's good," Marcus replied, squeezing her hand reassuringly. "That means a lot of people care about making sure children are treated fairly." As the meeting was called to order, Marcus felt his heart rate increase with anticipation. In just a few minutes, his daughters would take center stage in the most important performance of their young lives. One that would determine not just their own future, but potentially the futures of countless other children who deserved better than what they had been receiving from their educational system. The moment of truth was finally approaching, and the Thompson family was ready to show Millbrook exactly what real excellence looked like. The school board meeting room hummed with an unusual energy as Chairman Patricia Welkins called the session to order. Normally, these monthly gatherings drew sparse attendance, perhaps a dozen community members at most, usually parents with specific complaints about bus routes or curriculum concerns. Tonight, however, nearly every seat was occupied, and the air crackled with anticipation that suggested something significant was about to unfold. Marcus felt Lily's small hand slip into his left palm while Rose gripped his right, their nervous energy transferring through their touch as they prepared for what would undoubtedly be the most challenging moment of their young lives. Around them, familiar faces from Jefferson Elementary's parent community filled the rows, many of whom Marcus had never spoken to before this week, but who had reached out after hearing about their family's situation. Dr. Richard Hayes sat at the far end of the board table, his expensive suit and carefully styled silver hair projecting an image of authority and respectability that Marcus knew concealed a much darker reality. Next to him, Superintendent Margaret Crawford shuffled through a thick stack of papers with the efficiency of someone who had been managing educational bureaucracy for decades. The other board members appeared relaxed, apparently unaware that their comfortable assumptions about community power dynamics were about to be challenged in ways they couldn't possibly anticipate. "We'll begin tonight with our public comment period," Chairman Wilkins announced, her voice carrying the practiced neutrality of someone accustomed to managing potentially contentious community meetings. "Each speaker will have 3 minutes to address the board. Please remember that this is not a debate forum, and board members will not be responding to individual comments during this portion of the meeting." Marcus had signed up to speak during the registration period, listing his topic simply as student safety and academic environment concerns. He had deliberately kept his description vague, knowing that more specific language might have prompted Dr. Hayes or Principal Martinez to prepare defensive responses, or even attempt to limit his speaking time through procedural objections. "Our first speaker tonight is Marcus Thompson," Chairman Wilkins announced, consulting her list. "Mr. Thompson, you have 3 minutes. Marcus rose from his seat, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes following his movement as he approached the podium. Positioned directly in front of the board table, behind him, he could sense the supportive presence of other parents who had similar stories to tell, but he also felt the scrutiny of school officials who were undoubtedly hoping this would be a routine complaint that could be easily dismissed or deflected. "Thank you, Chairman Wilkins. Members of the board," Marcus began, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. "My name is Marcus Thompson, and I'm the father of 8-year-old twins Lily and Rose, who attend Jefferson Elementary. Yesterday, my daughters were suspended for 3 days after being involved in what Principal Martinez characterized as an unprovoked attack on 3 fifth-grade students." Marcus paused, noting how Dr. Hayes' expression tightened almost imperceptibly, while Superintendent Crawford's pen stopped moving across her notepad. The room had grown completely silent, the kind of focused attention that indicated the audience understood they were witnessing something more significant than typical parent complaints. However, the suspension was issued without any investigation into the circumstances that led to the incident. Marcus continued, his voice gaining strength. "My daughters were defending themselves against weeks of systematic bullying that included verbal harassment about our family's economic situation and cruel comments about their deceased mother. When they finally fought back after being cornered and threatened, they were immediately punished while their tormentors faced no consequences whatsoever." A murmur rippled through the audience, and Marcus noticed several board members exchanging glances that suggested this wasn't the routine presentation they had expected. Principal Martinez, who was seated in the section reserved for district administrators, appeared to be taking notes with increased urgency. "More concerning than the suspension itself is what happened when I attempted to investigate the incident," Marcus said, consulting his prepared notes to ensure he covered all the critical points. "I was told that security cameras in the relevant area of the playground had been malfunctioning for weeks, conveniently eliminating any video evidence. I was denied access to witness statements and told that requesting such information was inappropriate. When I suggested involving the district superintendent, I was warned that continuing to pursue the matter could have serious consequences for my daughter's academic future. Superintendent Crawford looked up sharply at this statement, her professional composure cracking slightly as she realized the implications of what Marcus was describing. Board member Thomas Chen, whom Marcus recognized as the owner of a local restaurant, leaned forward with obvious interest, apparently recognizing patterns of administrative misconduct that went beyond simple miscommunication. "What I discovered through my own investigation," Marcus continued, his voice growing more confident as he saw the board's engagement with his presentation, "is that this incident represents a much larger pattern of discrimination that protects certain students while targeting others based on their families' social and economic status. My daughters aren't the first children to be punished for defending themselves against bullying, and they won't be the last unless this board takes immediate action to address the toxic culture that has been allowed to flourish at Jefferson Elementary." Dr. Hayes finally spoke, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to controlling conversations. "Mr. Thompson, these are very serious allegations. Do you have specific evidence to support these claims, or are we dealing with the understandable emotions of a parent whose children were disciplined for inappropriate behavior?" Marcus felt a surge of anger at the dismissive tone, but he channeled that energy into determination rather than defensiveness. This was exactly the kind of response he had anticipated, the immediate attempt to characterize legitimate concerns as emotional overreaction from an unreliable source. "Dr. Hayes, I'm glad you asked about evidence," Marcus replied, gesturing toward Jake, who was positioned near the back of the room with his equipment. "Rather than simply describing my daughter's character and capabilities, I'd like to show the board exactly what kind of students Jefferson Elementary is allowing to be bullied and silenced." Marcus turned to address his daughters, who had been sitting quietly throughout his presentation, but were now standing and moving toward the open area in front of the board table. "Lily and Rose, would you please show these board members what you've been working on during your suspension?" The room fell completely silent as the twins positioned themselves in the center of the space, their small figures dwarfed by the formal setting, but radiating a confidence that seemed to transform the sterile meeting room into something approaching a performance venue. Jake activated his portable sound system, and the opening notes of their contemporary routine filled the space with energy that was both unexpected and electrifying. What followed was 3 minutes of absolutely mesmerizing performance that showcased not only the twins' extraordinary technical abilities, but also their remarkable emotional maturity and artistic vision. Their movements were precise yet fluid, powerful yet graceful, creating a visual narrative that spoke to resilience, determination, and the kind of inner strength that could only come from facing genuine adversity with courage and dignity. Marcus watched the board members' faces as his daughters danced, noting how their expressions shifted from surprise to amazement to something approaching awe. Superintendent Crawford had stopped taking notes entirely, her attention completely captured by the performance unfolding before her. Even Dr. Hayes appeared momentarily speechless, his carefully maintained composure cracking as he witnessed talent that clearly transcended anything he had expected from children he had presumably dismissed as insignificant. The audience response was immediate and overwhelming. Spontaneous applause erupted before the music had completely faded, growing into a standing ovation that filled the room with appreciation and support that felt almost tangible. Parents who had never met the Thompson family before tonight were wiping away tears, moved by both the beauty of the performance and the courage it had taken to share such personal artistry in such a formal, potentially hostile environment. "That," Marcus said, once the applause had subsided and his daughters had returned to their seats, "is what Jefferson Elementary suspended for defending themselves against bullying. Those are the students your current policies are failing to protect." Chairman Wilkins appeared to be struggling to maintain her professional neutrality, her voice slightly unsteady as she attempted to restore formal order to the meeting. "Mr. Thompson, that was certainly unexpected. However, we need to focus on the specific disciplinary issues rather than—" "Respectfully, Chairman Wilkins," Marcus interrupted, his confidence now unshakable. "What you just witnessed is directly relevant to the disciplinary issues. My daughters possess extraordinary talents that they've developed through their own initiative and hard work, despite having no formal training and limited resources. They represent exactly the kind of students our educational system should be, nurturing and protecting, not punishing, for defending themselves against systematic harassment." Board member Sandra Liu, a retired educator whom Marcus had researched and found to be generally supportive of progressive educational policies, spoke for the first time. "Mr. Thompson, can you elaborate on the specific nature of the bullying your daughters experienced? What you've described suggests a pattern of behavior that would typically trigger our anti-bullying protocols." Marcus felt a moment of validation, recognizing that at least one board member was taking his concerns seriously rather than simply trying to minimize or deflect them. "Ms. Liu, the harassment began several weeks ago and escalated consistently. My daughters were targeted specifically because of our family's economic circumstances and because their mother died 3 years ago. The verbal abuse included statements that poor children don't belong at Jefferson Elementary and that their mother died because she didn't want to be around them anymore." A collective gasp arose from several audience members, and Marcus noticed that even some of the board members appeared genuinely shocked by the cruelty he was describing. Principal Martinez, however, maintained her stoic expression, suggesting that she was either already aware of these details or had become skilled at concealing her reactions to uncomfortable revelations. "When my daughters attempted to report this harassment to their teacher, they were told they were being too sensitive and should try harder to fit in," Marcus continued. "When the bullying escalated to physical intimidation yesterday, and my daughters finally defended themselves, the school's response was immediate suspension without investigation, while their tormentors faced no consequences whatsoever." Superintendent Crawford finally spoke, her voice carrying the cautious tone of someone attempting to manage a situation that was rapidly spiraling beyond her control. "Mr. Thompson, these are very serious allegations about our administrative procedures. If there have been failures in our anti-bullying protocols, we need to investigate them thoroughly. However, I want to caution everyone that personnel matters, and specific disciplinary cases can't be discussed in detail in this public forum." "Dr. Crawford," Marcus replied, recognizing the classic bureaucratic attempt to move controversial discussions behind closed doors, where they could be more easily controlled. "My daughter's suspension is already a matter of public record. What I'm requesting is transparency about the decision-making process that led to that suspension and accountability for the administrators who failed to protect vulnerable students from systematic harassment." Dr. Hayes leaned forward, his expression hardening as he apparently realized that this situation couldn't be resolved through the usual combination of deflection and intimidation. "Mr. Thompson, you're making very serious accusations about the professional conduct of our educational staff. I hope you understand the legal implications of making unfounded claims about discrimination and administrative misconduct." The threat was clear and unmistakable, exactly the kind of intimidation tactics that Marcus had expected, but was now prepared to counter. Rather than responding with defensive anger, he maintained his calm demeanor while addressing the implicit warning directly. "Dr. Hayes, I understand the legal implications perfectly," Marcus said evenly. "That's why I've been very careful to document everything I've described tonight. I have copies of my daughter's statements about the bullying they experienced, records of their attempts to report the harassment through proper channels, and documentation of the school's failure to investigate or address those reports appropriately." Marcus paused for effect, letting his words settle before delivering his most significant revelation. "I've also been contacted by several other families who have experienced similar situations at Jefferson Elementary. Families whose children have been targeted by the same group of bullies while facing similar administrative indifference when they attempted to seek help through official channels." The murmur that arose from the audience suggested that Marcus's statement had touched on experiences that resonated with multiple families present at the meeting. Dr. Hayes's expression grew noticeably more tense, while Principal Martinez appeared to be calculating how to respond to accusations that were becoming increasingly difficult to dismiss or deflect. Board member Robert Kim, whom Marcus had identified as generally supportive of fiscal responsibility and administrative accountability, spoke with obvious concern. "Mr. Thompson, are you suggesting that there's a pattern of discriminatory enforcement of disciplinary policies at Jefferson Elementary?" "Mr. Kim, I'm not suggesting anything," Marcus replied firmly. "I'm stating directly that there appears to be a two-tiered system of justice at Jefferson Elementary, where certain students can engage in bullying behavior without consequences, while their victims are punished for defending themselves. This system appears to correlate strongly with the social and economic status of the families involved." The room erupted in scattered conversations as parents began discussing their own experiences with each other, apparently recognizing patterns they hadn't previously connected. Chairman Wilkins attempted to restore order by calling for quiet, but the energy in the room had shifted fundamentally, transforming from passive observation to active engagement with issues that clearly affected multiple families. "Mr. Thompson, your time has expired," Chairman Wilkins announced, consulting a timer. "However, given the serious nature of the issues you've raised, I think the board would benefit from hearing from other community members who may have relevant experiences to share." Marcus nodded gratefully and returned to his seat, where Lily and Rose immediately flanked him with expressions of pride and relief that they had successfully completed their part of the evening's presentation. Around them, several other parents were rising to approach the speaker registration table, apparently motivated by the Thompson family's courage to share their own stories. The next speaker was Maria Rodriguez, whose son Carlos was a third grader at Jefferson Elementary. Marcus had spoken with her earlier in the week and knew that her family had experienced similar patterns of discrimination, but he hadn't anticipated how powerful her testimony would be in supporting and expanding on the concerns he had raised. "My name is Maria Rodriguez, and my son Carlos is 8 years old," she began, her slight accent adding emotional weight to her words. 2 weeks ago, Carlos was pushed down on the playground by the same group of students Mr. Thompson mentioned. When he got up and pushed back, he was sent to the principal's office and received detention for 3 days. Mrs. Rodriguez paused, consulting notes she had written on a small piece of paper. "When I asked to see the playground surveillance video, I was told the same thing Mr. Thompson was told, that the cameras weren't working. When I asked to speak with witnesses, I was told that wasn't necessary because Carlos had admitted to pushing another student." Her voice grew stronger as she continued, feeding off the supportive energy from the audience. "But Carlos told me he was defending himself after being called names, about being Mexican and being told he should go back where he came from. When I tried to report this racist bullying to Principal Martinez, she said children sometimes say things they don't mean, and that Carlos needed to develop thicker skin. The audience response was immediate and visceral, with several parents expressing audible outrage at the description of racist harassment being dismissed as typical childhood behavior. Dr. Hayes appeared increasingly uncomfortable, while Superintendent Crawford was taking notes with obvious urgency. Like Mr. Thompson's daughters, my son is a good student who has never been in trouble before, Mrs. Rodriguez continued. But, unlike the students who are bullying him, Carlos doesn't have parents who serve on the school board or donate money to school fundraisers. He just has parents who work hard and expect the school to treat all children fairly. Her final statement drew sustained applause from the audience, and Marcus could see that the evening was developing a momentum that would be very difficult for the board to ignore or deflect. The pattern he had identified was being confirmed by multiple families, creating a body of evidence that couldn't be dismissed as isolated incidents or parental overreaction. The third speaker was Jennifer Park, whose daughter Jessica was in the same grade as the twins and had apparently been targeted by similar bullying tactics. Her testimony added another dimension to the emerging picture of systematic discrimination, focusing on the racial and cultural harassment that seemed to be tolerated when directed at certain students while being ignored by administrators. My daughter Jessica has been called names about being Asian for the entire school year, Mrs. Park began, her voice trembling with suppressed emotion. She's been told that she and her family eat weird food, that she should learn to speak English better even though she was born here, and that Asian kids are only good at math and nothing else. The racial targeting that Mrs. Park described was even more explicit than what the Thompson twins had experienced, suggesting that the bullying at Jefferson Elementary wasn't limited to economic discrimination, but extended to harassment based on ethnicity, family structure, and any characteristic that distinguished certain students from the dominant social group. When Jessica finally told her teacher about the name-calling, she was told that children need to learn to solve their own problems, and that involving adults would only make the situation worse, Mrs. Park continued. But when Jessica defended herself by telling the bullies to leave her alone, she was reprimanded for being disrespectful and aggressive. Dr. Hayes attempted to interrupt Mrs. Park's testimony, apparently uncomfortable with the increasingly detailed accusations of administrative failure. Mrs. Park, I want to remind you that discussing specific incidents involving named students could create privacy issues for all the families involved. Mrs. Park's response was immediate and forceful. Dr. Hayes, I'm discussing my own daughter's experiences, and I have every right to do so in this public forum. If you're concerned about privacy, perhaps you should be more concerned about protecting children's privacy from bullies rather than protecting administrators from accountability. Her response drew enthusiastic applause from the audience, and Marcus could see that the community's patience with bureaucratic deflection tactics was rapidly evaporating. The board members were beginning to realize that they were facing a coordinated effort that had been carefully planned and couldn't be easily dismissed through their usual methods. The fourth speaker was David Chen, Mrs. Chen's nephew and a local business owner whose children attended Jefferson Elementary. His testimony focused on the economic dimensions of the discrimination patterns, describing how children from working-class families were systematically excluded from social activities and academic opportunities that were readily available to children from wealthier backgrounds. The PTA fundraising activities consistently benefit the same small group of families, Mr. Chen explained, consulting detailed notes he had prepared. Art supplies, computer equipment, field trip opportunities, even additional teacher resources. All seem to flow primarily to classrooms where the most influential parents have children. His analysis added a structural dimension to the individual stories of bullying and discrimination, suggesting that the problems at Jefferson Elementary weren't simply the result of inadequate supervision, but reflected deeper issues of resource allocation and institutional bias that favored certain families while marginalizing others. When children see that some families get special treatment while others are ignored or dismissed, they learn that hierarchy and exclusion are acceptable behaviors. Mr. Chen continued, "The bullying that Mr. Thompson and other parents have described isn't happening in spite of the school's culture, it's happening because of that culture." As speaker after speaker shared similar experiences, a comprehensive picture emerged of systematic discrimination that extended far beyond the individual incident involving the Thompson twins. The school board members appeared increasingly uncomfortable as they realized they were facing evidence of institutional failure that couldn't be explained away through isolated incidents or communication breakdowns. Principal Martinez finally requested permission to respond to the accusations, apparently hoping to provide damage control before the situation deteriorated further. Chairman Welkins granted her 3 minutes to address the board and community, setting up what promised to be a critical moment in the evening's proceedings. Chairman Welkins, board members, concerned parents, Principal Martinez began, her voice carrying practiced authority but lacking the confidence she had displayed. During her meeting with Marcus and the twins, "I want to assure everyone that Jefferson Elementary takes all reports of bullying very seriously and follows district protocols consistently and fairly." Her opening statement immediately rang false to Marcus, given his direct experience with a dismissive attitude and unwillingness to investigate his daughter's situation thoroughly. Around him, he could see other parents exchanging skeptical glances, apparently having similar reactions based on their own interactions with the principal. The incidents described tonight represent isolated situations that may have been misunderstood or miscommunicated, Principal Martinez continued, apparently attempting to characterize the systematic patterns as random misunderstandings. Our teachers and staff work tirelessly to create a safe and inclusive environment for all students, regardless of their backgrounds or family circumstances. Board member Liu interrupted the principal's statement with a question that cut directly to the heart of the credibility issues surrounding her response. Principal Martinez, if these incidents represent isolated misunderstandings, how do you explain the fact that multiple families are reporting similar experiences with administrative dismissal of their concerns? Principal Martinez appeared momentarily flustered by the directness of the question, suggesting that she had expected to be able to present her defense without immediate challenge. Ms. Liu, sometimes parents misinterpret our efforts to help children develop independence and conflict resolution skills. What might appear dismissive is actually part of our educational approach to building resilience. The explanation fell flat with the audience, several of whom could be heard expressing skeptical murmurs about the characterization of racist harassment as conflict resolution education. Marcus could see that Principal Martinez's defensive response was actually strengthening the case against the school's handling of these situations. Principal Martinez, Board Member Kim interjected, can you explain the security camera malfunctions that seem to have eliminated video evidence in multiple incidents involving these families? The question clearly caught the principal off guard, and her pause before responding suggested that she was calculating how to address technical issues that appeared suspiciously convenient. Mr. Kim, our security systems are aging and sometimes experience technical difficulties. We report all malfunctions to the district maintenance department as soon as they're discovered. How often do these malfunctions occur? Kim pressed, apparently sensing weakness in her explanation. "I don't have specific statistics with me tonight," Principal Martinez replied, her discomfort becoming increasingly obvious. "But I can provide that information to the board if requested." Superintendent Crawford stepped in to support her principal, apparently recognizing that the questioning was revealing problems that reflected poorly on district oversight and accountability. "Board members, I think we're getting into operational details that would be better addressed through proper administrative channels rather than in this public forum." Marcus felt a surge of frustration at the attempt to move the discussion behind closed doors, where it could be more easily controlled and potentially buried. He stood up from his seat, drawing attention back to the central issues that had brought the community together. "Dr. Crawford, with respect, these operational details have created real harm for real children," Marcus said firmly. "My daughters and these other families deserve transparent accountability, not administrative deflection. If there are systematic problems with how Jefferson Elementary handles bullying and discrimination, the community has a right to know about them and to see them addressed publicly." His statement drew enthusiastic applause from the audience, and Marcus could see that the board members were beginning to realize they couldn't simply defer these issues to private administrative processes without facing significant community pressure and potential legal liability. Chairman Wilkins attempted to regain control of the meeting's direction while acknowledging the seriousness of the issues that had been raised. "Mr. Thompson, the board appreciates the concerns you and other families have brought to our attention. Tonight, these are serious matters that require thorough investigation and appropriate response." She paused, consulting with other board members before continuing. "I'm directing Superintendent Crawford to conduct a comprehensive review of anti-bullying policies and procedures at Jefferson Elementary, with specific attention to the incidents described tonight. We'll also be reviewing security system maintenance records and staff training protocols." The response was more substantial than Marcus had dared to hope for, suggesting that the board was taking the community pressure seriously and couldn't simply dismiss the systematic patterns that had been documented. However, he also recognized that bureaucratic investigations could easily become methods of delay and deflection if they weren't accompanied by immediate accountability measures. "Chairman Wilkins, we appreciate the board's commitment to investigation," Marcus replied carefully. "However, I want to ensure that the investigation includes interviews with all affected families and that the results are shared publicly rather than buried in administrative reports. Additionally," he continued, feeling the momentum of community support behind him, "I request that my daughter's suspension be immediately overturned, pending the results of this investigation, since it was issued without proper investigation and appears to represent exactly the kind of discriminatory enforcement the board is now promising to address." The request for immediate action, rather than simply future investigation, drew strong support from the audience, with several parents expressing agreement that punitive measures issued without proper process should be reversed, pending comprehensive review. Dr. Hayes spoke for the first time since his earlier attempt at intimidation, apparently realizing that the situation required a more substantial response to prevent further escalation. "Mr. Thompson, the board can't overturn specific disciplinary decisions without following proper appeals procedures. However, we can certainly expedite any formal appeals you choose to file." Marcus recognized the bureaucratic dodge, but also understood that he had achieved something significant by forcing the board to acknowledge the systematic problems and commit to investigation. The evening had established a public record of community concern that would make it much more difficult for administrators to continue ignoring or minimizing these issues. "Dr. Hayes, I'll be filing formal appeals for my daughters and supporting other families who choose to do the same," Marcus replied. But I want to emphasize that this isn't just about individual cases anymore. Tonight has revealed institutional problems that require institutional solutions. As the public comment period concluded and the board moved on to other agenda items, Marcus felt a mixture of satisfaction and determination. They had accomplished more than he had hoped in terms of public exposure and board acknowledgement, but he also knew that real change would require sustained pressure and continued organizing. Within the parent community, the Thompson family had taken their stand, and Millbrook was beginning to listen. The days following the school board meeting brought an unexpected whirlwind of attention that transformed the Thompson family's quiet existence into something resembling the eye of a media storm. Marcus's phone hadn't stopped ringing since Jake had posted the video of the twins' performance online, where it had accumulated over 50,000 views in just 3 days and sparked conversations that extended far beyond the boundaries of Millbrook. Local news stations from 3 neighboring cities had contacted Marcus requesting interviews, while the video had been shared on social media platforms by education advocates, anti-bullying organizations, and talent scouts who recognized the extraordinary abilities displayed by Lily and Rose. What had started as a simple attempt to advocate for fair treatment at their elementary school had evolved into something much larger and more complex than anyone in the family had anticipated. "Daddy, there's a lady at the door with a big camera," Rose announced, peering through the living room curtains at yet another news crew, hoping to capture the story of the dancing twins who had challenged their school district's handling of bullying incidents. Marcus sighed and set down his coffee mug, mentally preparing for another round of interviews that would require him to balance his desire for justice with his instinct to protect his daughters from excessive media attention. The story had taken on a life of its own, and while the publicity was helping to pressure the school district toward meaningful reforms, it was also creating complications he hadn't fully considered when he first decided to speak out publicly. "Girls, remember what we talked about," Marcus said gently as he prepared to answer the door. "You don't have to talk to reporters if you don't want to, and you can always ask me to stop any interview if you feel uncomfortable." The journalist at the door introduced herself as Amanda Foster from Channel 7 News, accompanied by a cameraman whose professional equipment suggested this would be a more substantial piece than the brief local coverage they had received earlier in the week. Amanda's approach was respectful and well-researched, indicating that she had done her homework about the family's situation and the broader issues surrounding educational equity and anti-bullying policies. "Mr. Thompson, I've been following your story since the school board meeting, and I'm particularly interested in how your daughter's artistic talents relate to the discrimination they experienced," Amanda began, settling into the modest living room that had become an impromptu interview space. "Can you help our viewers understand the connection between creativity and the kind of educational environment you're advocating for?" Marcus appreciated the thoughtful framing of her question, which focused on substantive issues rather than simply sensationalizing the David versus Goliath narrative that some outlets had preferred. "Amanda, I think what people are responding to isn't just my daughter's dancing ability, but what their talent represents about potential and worth. Lily and Rose taught themselves to dance using free videos and pure determination, which shows what children can accomplish when they're supported and encouraged, rather than dismissed or bullied." He gestured toward his daughters, who were sitting quietly on the couch, but listening intently to the adult conversation about their experiences. The school system was ready to write them off as troublemakers based on one incident, without considering who they really are or what they're capable of achieving. That's the problem we're trying to address, not just for our family, but for every child whose potential is being overlooked or suppressed. Amanda turned her attention to the twins, her Questions carefully calibrated for their age and comfort level. Lily and Rose, when you're dancing, how does it make you feel? Is it different from how you feel at school? Lily, usually the quieter of the two, surprised everyone by answering first. When we dance, we feel free and happy and like we can do anything. At school, we felt small and scared and like we weren't supposed to be there. But now that people have seen our dancing, maybe other kids who feel small will know they're special too, Rose added, her natural empathy extending the conversation beyond their personal experience to encompass the broader impact they hoped to achieve. The interview continued for another 20 minutes, with Amanda skillfully drawing out details about the family's journey while respecting their privacy and maintaining focus on the systemic issues rather than exploiting their personal tragedy for dramatic effect. Marcus found himself impressed by her professionalism and grateful that their story was being handled with the dignity it deserved. After the news crew departed, Marcus checked his email to find messages from parents in other school districts, describing similar experiences with discrimination and administrative indifference. The Thompson family's courage in speaking out had apparently inspired others to share their own stories, creating a network of advocacy that extended far beyond Jefferson Elementary and suggested that the problems they had identified weren't isolated to their particular school or community. One message particularly caught Marcus's attention, sent by Dr. Patricia Williams, an education researcher at the State University who specialized in equity issues and anti-bullying interventions. Dr. Williams had seen the news coverage and wanted to offer her professional expertise in documenting and addressing the systematic problems the Thompson family had exposed. Mr. Thompson, I've been studying educational discrimination patterns for over 15 years, and your family's experience fits a troubling model I've observed in districts across the state, her email explained. I'd like to offer my services as a researcher and advocate to help ensure that the investigation promised by your school board actually produces meaningful changes rather than simply bureaucratic delay tactics. Marcus immediately called Dr. Williams, recognizing that her academic credentials and research expertise could provide the kind of objective analysis that would be difficult for school administrators to dismiss or deflect. During their conversation, she explained that she had developed comprehensive assessment tools for identifying institutional bias in educational settings and had successfully helped other communities implement lasting reforms. What you've described about Jefferson Elementary fits a pattern I call selective enforcement, where disciplinary policies are applied differently depending on students' demographic characteristics, Dr. Williams explained. The security camera malfunctions, the dismissive responses to bullying reports, the immediate punishment of victims who defend themselves. These aren't random incidents, but components of a systematic approach that protects certain students while targeting others. Her analysis confirmed Marcus's intuitive understanding of what his family had experienced while providing the kind of academic framework that could help them build a more compelling case for institutional change. Dr. Williams offered to conduct a comprehensive assessment of Jefferson Elementary's policies and practices using methodologies that had been validated in peer-reviewed research and accepted by education professionals nationwide. The key is to move beyond individual complaints to demonstrate institutional patterns that violate federal anti-discrimination laws, Dr. Williams continued. Your daughter's case becomes much more powerful when it's understood as part of a broader system of exclusion and marginalization that affects multiple protected classes. Marcus felt energized by the conversation, recognizing that Dr. Williams's involvement could transform their advocacy efforts from emotional appeals to evidence-based demands for compliance with federal education laws. He immediately contacted The other parents who had spoken at the school board meeting, sharing Dr. Williams's offer and beginning to organize a more systematic approach to documenting and addressing the problems they had identified. Meanwhile, the twins were adapting to their newfound attention with a maturity that continued to amaze Marcus. They had received hundreds of supportive messages through social media, many from children who shared their own experiences with bullying, and expressed gratitude for the courage the Thompson family had shown in speaking out publicly. "Daddy, a girl from California sent us a video of her dancing," Rose reported, showing Marcus her tablet where she had been carefully reviewing messages with his supervision. She said watching us made her feel brave enough to try out for her school's talent show. These connections with other children seemed to energize the twins more than the adult attention they were receiving, giving them a sense of purpose that extended beyond their own situation to encompass a broader mission of encouragement and advocacy for young people facing similar challenges. "Girls, I'm so proud of how you're handling all this attention," Marcus said, settling between them on the couch. "You're showing other kids that they don't have to accept being treated badly, and that their talents and dreams matter regardless of what some people might say about their families or backgrounds." The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door, but this time it wasn't another journalist. Instead, Marcus opened the door to find Victoria Hayes, Dr. Richard Hayes' wife, standing on his doorstep with an expression that mixed nervousness with determination. "Mr. Thompson, I hope you don't mind my coming by unannounced," Mrs. Hayes began, her carefully modulated voice suggesting someone accustomed to managing difficult social situations. "I was hoping we could have a private conversation about recent events." Marcus felt his protective instincts activate immediately, unsure whether this unexpected visit represented an attempt at reconciliation or some form of intimidation disguised as social courtesy. He stepped outside and closed the door behind him, ensuring that his daughters wouldn't overhear whatever conversation was about to unfold. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm surprised to see you here," Marcus said carefully, maintaining a polite but guarded tone. "What can I do for you?" "I wanted to apologize for my daughter's behavior and to see if we might find a way to resolve this situation that doesn't require continued media attention," Mrs. Hayes replied, her words suggesting a carefully prepared script rather than spontaneous conversation. Marcus studied her face, recognizing the kind of calculated approach he had encountered from her husband during the school board meeting. "Mrs. Hayes, I appreciate you coming here, but I'm not sure what you mean by resolving the situation. Are you suggesting that systematic bullying and administrative bias can be resolved through private negotiations?" Mrs. Hayes appeared uncomfortable with his directness, apparently having expected a more deferential response from someone she likely viewed as occupying a lower social position. "Mr. Thompson, I think there may have been misunderstandings on all sides. Children sometimes say things they don't mean, and perhaps the school's response wasn't as thorough as it should have been." "Misunderstandings?" Marcus repeated, his voice sharpening despite his efforts to remain diplomatic. "Mrs. Hayes, your daughter and her friends told my children that their mother died because she didn't want to be around them anymore. That's not a misunderstanding, that's deliberate cruelty designed to cause maximum emotional harm." The accusation clearly caught Mrs. Hayes off guard, her composed expression cracking as she apparently realized that Marcus possessed detailed knowledge of the harassment her daughter had perpetrated. She quickly regrouped, switching to a different approach that revealed more about her family's typical methods of managing problems. "Mr. Thompson, I understand you're upset, but continuing to pursue this matter publicly could have unintended consequences for everyone involved," she said, her tone shifting towards something that sounded suspiciously like a veiled threat. "Perhaps we could discuss ways to ensure your daughters receive appropriate educational opportunities while avoiding further controversy. Marcus felt his anger rising at the implied suggestion that his family should accept some form of payment or special treatment in exchange for ending their advocacy efforts. The offer revealed exactly the kind of thinking that had created the problems at Jefferson Elementary in the first place, the assumption that social and economic privilege could be used to buy silence and avoid accountability. Mrs. Hayes, are you offering my family some kind of compensation to stop speaking out about discrimination and bullying at Jefferson Elementary? Marcus asked directly, wanting to ensure there was no ambiguity about what was being proposed. I'm simply suggesting that there might be ways to address your concerns without continuing to involve the media and create unnecessary conflict, Mrs. Hayes replied. But her discomfort with his direct questioning was obvious. The conflict wasn't created by my family speaking out about mistreatment, Marcus said firmly. The conflict was created by a system that allows certain children to bully others with impunity while punishing their victims for defending themselves. If you want to address my concerns, you can start by ensuring that your daughter faces appropriate consequences for her behavior and that the administrators who enabled that behavior are held accountable. Mrs. Hayes's face flushed with anger at his refusal to accept her implied offer, revealing the sense of entitlement that Marcus suspected lay beneath her family's public philanthropy and community involvement. Mr. Thompson, I hope you understand that my husband has significant influence in this community. Continuing to make accusations could affect your employment prospects and your family's future here. The threat was now explicit and unmistakable, confirming Marcus's suspicions about the methods the Hayes family used to maintain their position and silence criticism. Rather than intimidating him, however, the blatant attempt at coercion strengthened his resolve to continue fighting for systemic change. Mrs. Hayes, thank you for clarifying your family's approach to community relations, Marcus replied, his voice steady despite his anger. I want to make sure I understand correctly. You're threatening my employment and my family's ability to live in this community because we've spoken out about your daughter's bullying behavior and the school's failure to address it appropriately. I'm not threatening anyone, Mrs. Hayes said quickly, apparently realizing she had overplayed her hand. I'm simply trying to help you understand the potential consequences of continuing to make public accusations. The potential consequences I'm concerned about are the ones faced by children who are being systematically bullied and marginalized by people who think their wealth and connections make them untouchable, Marcus replied. If your family wants to demonstrate good faith, you can start by acknowledging your daughter's behavior and supporting meaningful reforms rather than trying to buy or threaten your way out of accountability. Mrs. Hayes turned and walked quickly toward her expensive SUV without responding, apparently recognizing that her mission had failed completely and had actually strengthened Marcus's position by revealing the tactics her family was willing to employ to avoid consequences for their actions. Marcus watched her drive away before returning inside, where he found the twins anxiously waiting for an explanation of the unexpected visitor. He explained the conversation in age-appropriate terms, emphasizing that some people try to use money and threats to avoid taking responsibility for their actions, but that doing the right thing was more important than avoiding conflict with powerful people. Daddy, does this mean we might have to move away from Millbrook? Lily asked quietly, her young mind already understanding some of the implications of challenging influential community members. Sweetheart, we're not going anywhere, Marcus assured her, pulling both girls close. This is our home, and we have every right to live here and to expect fair treatment from our schools and community institutions. If some people don't like that, That's their problem to solve, not ours. The incident with Mrs. Hayes actually proved beneficial in unexpected ways, as Marcus immediately contacted Dr. Williams to report the attempted intimidation and to discuss how such tactics fit into the broader patterns of institutional protection for privileged families. Dr. Williams explained that attempted suppression of complaints often indicated that the underlying problems were more serious than initially apparent, and that documenting such efforts could strengthen their case significantly. What Mrs. Hayes did today is actually evidence of the very power dynamics we're trying to address, Dr. Williams explained during their follow-up phone call. Her assumption that she could resolve this through private negotiation or intimidation reveals how accustomed her family is to avoiding accountability through wealth and influence, rather than addressing legitimate concerns through proper channels. Dr. Williams also suggested that Marcus contact the regional office of the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, explaining that the attempted intimidation could constitute retaliation for filing discrimination complaints and might trigger federal investigation of the school district's practices. That evening, Marcus received an unexpected phone call from Superintendent Crawford, who requested an immediate meeting to discuss the concerns raised at the school board meeting. Her tone was significantly more respectful than it had been during their previous interactions, suggesting that the media attention and community pressure were having their intended effect on district administrators. Mr. Thompson, I want you to know that the district is taking the issues you raised very seriously, Dr. Crawford began when they met the following morning in her office. We've initiated a comprehensive review of our anti-bullying policies and procedures, and we're committed to addressing any deficiencies we identify. Marcus appreciated the more collaborative tone, but remained skeptical about whether bureaucratic review processes would produce meaningful change without continued pressure and oversight. Dr. Crawford, I'm glad the district is taking action, but I want to ensure that this review includes input from affected families and produces concrete changes rather than simply generating reports that get filed away. Absolutely, Dr. Crawford replied. In fact, I'd like to invite you to participate in the review process as a parent representative. Your insights could be valuable in helping us improve our policies and procedures. The offer was more substantial than Marcus had expected, but he also recognized that tokenistic inclusion could be used to legitimize inadequate reforms while giving the appearance of meaningful change. He decided to accept the invitation while also maintaining his independent advocacy efforts and the involvement of Dr. Williams as an external evaluator. I'll participate in the review process, Marcus said carefully, but I also want to continue working with Dr. Patricia Williams from the State University, who has offered to conduct an independent assessment of the district's practices. Transparency and external validation will be essential for building community confidence in whatever changes are ultimately implemented. Dr. Crawford's expression tightened slightly at the mention of outside evaluation, but she agreed to cooperate with Dr. Williams's research while emphasizing the district's commitment to internal improvement processes. Marcus left the meeting feeling cautiously optimistic about the potential for meaningful change, while remaining vigilant about the need for continued pressure and accountability. The twins, meanwhile, had received an invitation that excited them, far more than the adult meetings and bureaucratic processes surrounding their case. A regional dance academy had seen their viral video and wanted to offer them partial scholarships for professional training, recognizing their extraordinary natural talent and their potential for continued artistic development. Daddy, does this mean we could become real dancers like the ones we see on TV? Rose asked, her eyes shining with possibility as Marcus explained the academy's offer. It means you already are real dancers, Marcus replied. and this could help you become even better if that's what you want to pursue. The scholarship offer represented an opportunity Marcus never could have imagined affording on his construction worker's salary. But it also raised questions about how to balance the twins' artistic development with their need for stability and normal childhood experiences. The family spent several evenings discussing the possibilities and challenges, with the twins ultimately expressing enthusiasm for the advanced training, while emphasizing their desire to continue advocating for other children facing similar challenges. "We want to keep dancing and getting better," Lily said thoughtfully, "but we also want to make sure our story helps other kids who are being picked on at school." Their mature perspective on balancing personal opportunities with social responsibility filled Marcus with pride and confirmed his belief that their experiences with adversity had strengthened rather than diminished their character and empathy. As the week progressed, the pressure on Jefferson Elementary and the school district continued to intensify. Dr. Williams had begun her formal assessment, conducting interviews with affected families and reviewing district policies with the kind of systematic approach that was revealing troubling patterns of bias and inconsistent enforcement. Meanwhile, the media attention had attracted the notice of state education officials, who announced their own investigation into the district's compliance with federal anti-discrimination laws. The combination of academic research, media scrutiny, and potential state intervention was creating the kind of comprehensive pressure that made it difficult for administrators to continue minimizing or deflecting the issues the Thompson family had exposed. "Mr. Thompson, I want you to know that your courage in speaking out has created an opportunity for real change that extends far beyond your own situation," Dr. Williams told him during one of their regular check-in calls. "The data I'm collecting is revealing systematic problems that have been affecting dozens of families over several years, but nobody had previously connected the individual incidents into a broader pattern." Her research was documenting exactly what Marcus had suspected, that Jefferson Elementary had developed an informal but consistent practice of protecting students from influential families while subjecting others to harsher scrutiny and punishment. The pattern was subtle enough to avoid obvious legal violations while being pervasive enough to create a toxic environment for children who didn't fit the preferred demographic profile. "The good news," Dr. Williams continued, "is that once these patterns are documented and exposed, they become much more difficult to maintain. Administrators and board members can't claim ignorance anymore, which means they'll be forced to implement meaningful reforms or face potential legal liability." As Marcus reflected on the whirlwind of changes that had transformed his family's life in just 2 weeks, he felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration that reminded him of the early days of his relationship with Sarah, when everything seemed possible and the future felt full of unlimited potential. The twins had gone from being suspended and silenced to becoming symbols of resilience and artistic excellence that inspired children across the region. Their story had exposed systematic problems that were now receiving the kind of serious attention that could produce lasting improvements for countless other families. Most importantly, Lily and Rose had discovered that their voices mattered, that their talents deserved recognition, and that standing up for themselves and others could create positive change, even when it felt scary and uncertain. As Marcus tucked them into bed that night, listening to their excited chatter about dance academy possibilities and plans for helping other bullied children, he realized that Sarah's dreams for their daughters were being fulfilled in ways none of them could have imagined. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight, the Thompson family could rest in the knowledge that they had found their voices and were using them to make the world a little more just and beautiful than they had found it. 6 months later, Marcus stood at the back of Jefferson Elementary's newly renovated auditorium, Watching his daughters perform in the school's first annual Every Voice Matters talent showcase, the transformation of both the physical space and the institutional culture had exceeded even his most optimistic expectations when this journey began with a simple suspension that had seemed like the end of the world. Principal Martinez had been quietly transferred to the district office following Dr. Williams's comprehensive report, which documented systematic discrimination affecting over 30 families across multiple years. Her replacement, Principal Angela Rodriguez, had implemented sweeping policy changes that included mandatory anti-bias training for all staff, transparent disciplinary procedures, and a student advocacy program that gave children multiple channels for reporting harassment, without fear of retaliation. The security camera malfunctions had mysteriously resolved themselves once the state investigation began, revealing a pattern of selective enforcement that had protected certain students while targeting others based on family demographics. 3 teachers had received formal reprimands for failing to follow proper bullying intervention protocols, while the district had established an independent oversight committee that included parent representatives and community advocates. Dr. Hayes had resigned from the school board rather than face public hearings about his family's role in maintaining discriminatory practices, though Victoria Hayes continued her community volunteer work with noticeably more humility and less obvious favoritism. Madison Hayes herself had been required to complete community service hours and participate in empathy workshops, an experience that seemed to have genuinely changed her perspective on how her actions affected other students. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lily and Rose Thompson, performing an original choreography titled Finding Our Wings. Principal Rodriguez announced to enthusiastic applause from an audience that included families from across the district who had come to celebrate the new culture of inclusion and artistic expression. The twins took the stage with confidence that radiated from every movement, their growth as both performers and advocates evident in the way they commanded attention while remaining completely authentic to their gentle, empathetic natures. Their routine combined technical excellence with emotional storytelling that spoke to resilience, community support, and the power of standing up for what's right even when it feels impossible. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes as he watched his daughters dance, not just because of their extraordinary talent, but because of the journey that had brought them to this moment of triumph and recognition. Sarah would have been so proud to see them using their gifts to inspire others, while never losing the compassion and integrity that made them special long before anyone else recognized their abilities. The Dance Academy Scholarship had provided professional training that enhanced their natural abilities, but more importantly, it had connected them with other young artists who shared their passion for using performance as a vehicle for social change. Lily and Rose had become mentors for younger students, teaching free classes at the community center and organizing fundraisers for anti-bullying programs in neighboring districts. "They're incredible," whispered Maria Rodriguez, who was standing nearby with her son Carlos, now thriving in the transformed school environment where his academic achievements were celebrated and his cultural background was respected rather than mocked. "It's hard to believe they're the same girls who were suspended for defending themselves just 6 months ago." The performance concluded to thunderous applause, but what touched Marcus most deeply was seeing Madison Hayes and her friends standing and clapping with genuine enthusiasm rather than the grudging politeness he might have expected. The restorative justice processes implemented by the new administration had apparently succeeded in building understanding rather than simply imposing punishment. After the showcase, dozens of families approached Marcus to thank him for his courage in speaking out and to share their own stories of positive changes they had witnessed in their children's educational experiences. The ripple effects of the Thompson family's advocacy had extended far beyond Jefferson Elementary, inspiring similar reform efforts in districts across the state. Mr. Thompson, I wanted you to know that the policy changes here have become a model for other districts, Dr. Williams informed him as they watched the twins accept congratulations from classmates and teachers. Your daughter's story has literally changed how we approach educational equity and anti-bullying interventions on a statewide level. The recognition was gratifying, but Marcus remained focused on the daily reality of ensuring that all children could attend school without fear of harassment or discrimination. The systemic changes were encouraging, but maintaining them would require continued vigilance and community engagement from parents who understood that equality was an ongoing commitment rather than a one-time achievement. Uncle Marcus, can you help me with my audition video? Asked Jessica Park, who had overcome her fear of performing after watching the twins' courage and was now preparing to try out for a regional youth theatre program. The sight of formerly isolated children now pursuing their dreams with confidence provided daily confirmation that their struggle had produced lasting positive change. As the evening wound down and families began heading home, Marcus gathered his daughters for a quiet moment before they joined the reception celebrating the showcase's success. He wanted them to understand not just what they had accomplished, but why their journey mattered for other children facing similar challenges. Girls, do you remember how scared you felt that morning when I picked you up from Principal Martinez's office? Marcus asked, settling on the auditorium steps between his daughters. We thought we were in terrible trouble and that nobody would believe us, Lily recalled, her voice reflecting the confidence she had gained through months of advocacy and artistic growth. But look what happened when we decided to tell the truth and show people who we really are, Rose added, gesturing toward the auditorium where families were still celebrating the evening's performances. It wasn't just about us anymore. It became about making things better for everyone. Marcus nodded, proud of their mature understanding of how individual courage could create collective change. That's exactly right. Sometimes, when we stand up for ourselves, we discover that we're also standing up for people we haven't even met yet, people who needed someone to speak first so they could find their own voices. Now, the twins had indeed found their voices in every sense, becoming not just accomplished performers, but thoughtful advocates who understood that talent carried responsibility and that success meant lifting others rather than simply elevating themselves. Their story had evolved from victimization to empowerment to community leadership in ways that honored Sarah's memory while creating a legacy that would extend far beyond their own lives. Daddy, next year we want to start a program where kids can learn about different kinds of art and how to use their creativity to help solve problems, Lily announced, revealing plans they had apparently been developing without his knowledge. And we want to make sure kids who don't have money for lessons can still participate, Rose added, their natural empathy extending to ensure that opportunities would be available regardless of family economic circumstances. Marcus hugged his daughters tightly, marveling at how they had transformed personal pain into a mission of service that would continue benefiting their community for years to come. The bullying they had endured had been terrible and unjust, but their response to that injustice had revealed character strengths that might never have been tested under easier circumstances. As they walked toward the parking lot, Marcus reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought them from that devastating suspension to this evening of celebration and community recognition. The path had required more courage than he had known he possessed, but it had also revealed reserves of strength and wisdom in his daughters that filled him with confidence about their future. The Thompson family had not only survived their encounter with institutional discrimination and community pressure, they had transformed those challenges into opportunities for growth, advocacy, and positive change that would benefit countless other families. Their story had become proof that ordinary people could create extraordinary change when they refused to accept injustice and had the courage to demand better from their institutions and communities. Lily and Rose would continue dancing, growing as artists and advocates, and continue inspiring other children to believe in their own worth and potential. But tonight, as they drove home through the quiet streets of Millbrook, they could rest in the knowledge that they had helped create a more just and inclusive community where every child's voice truly mattered. The twin sisters who had once been bullied for being different were now celebrated for the very qualities that made them special, and their father's love and advocacy had helped transform not just their own lives, but the entire educational landscape of their community. Sometimes the most powerful dance is the one where you refuse to let others choreograph your steps, where you move to the rhythm of your own truth and invite the whole world to witness what authentic courage looks like in motion. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.